Dallas home prices have gone up over 44% since the pandemic. And anytime you hear numbers and Dallas real estate, the natural inclination is to worry about overpaying, being upside down, entering the market at the wrong time. But what if I told you that's not the biggest mistake homebuyers are making? That there's something much larger and sinister in play that will hurt you far worse than overpaying for a home. Say for example, in 2007, we personally were upside down. Like every rental we owned, our personal home, we had paid more for every house than it was worth. I mean, devastating, right? Well, no, the housing market had crashed, but we kept on making the payments, kept on cash flowing with our rentals, and it never destroyed our world. I mean, it was incredibly discouraging, but it was ultimately a passive loss. Now, don't get me wrong, okay? Overpaying for a home is a terrible thing, and you absolutely must rely on a strategic and systematic approach to home buying and evaluating market sales data to ensure that doesn't happen. So don't hear me in this video saying it's okay to overpay, okay? Because I am not saying that. But what I am saying is that there is something that's far worse. What's really going to devastate you even more, even closer to home, is in not understanding how your monthly payment can change. That's when, if you are upside down, it goes from being a demoralizing bummer into a devastating event that jacks up your future. So how do we get there? Well, in not understanding all the variables and predatory advice that originates your monthly payment. I mean, when you're renting, it's uncomplicated. One payment, and if you're in a fixed lease, it's not going to change until the lease expires, right? Well, homeownership isn't like that. It's a sum of numerous parts, including your mortgage, your escrow, meaning your property taxes and insurance, and more than likely your HOA. There may also be a PID, a MUD, or mortgage insurance. Now, I'm going to assume in this video that you played it safe and went with a fixed rate mortgage. It's not going to change over the course of the mortgage. But here's the thing, and something you really need to know. A fixed rate mortgage is not the same as a fixed monthly payment. Your house payment, your monthly payment, it can change, and it can change a lot. In fact, one thing I always advise our buyers is to be intentional and informed when it comes to deciding how much of your loan pre-approval you'd like to spend. So if you're pre-approved for $600 and we can find you a home for $510, okay, that's a win. You want to be deliberate with your budget because there are variables that can and will change your payment, some of which could be significant, okay? So let's get into that. All right, let's talk about the developer-controlled community. Now, typically with new construction, the builder and developer are subsidizing the HOA. Now, if you think about it, okay, this makes sense, okay? There aren't enough houses and homeowners to pay those HOA fees yet. Now, the problem that you run into here, okay, the problem is this can allow them to advertise the HOA to be a certain amount, even if the collective amount at that price would never support the expenses. Since the developer is subsidizing the HOA, the costs can be communicated as artificially low. So you buy in expecting the HOA to be maybe, like $75 a month, only to have the developer move out and now the payment's doubled or tripled. I mean, I know it's not an official source, but check out what Reddit has to say. Does the HOA bill go up after the developer finishes and leaves the neighborhood? The writer says, the HOA's payment of our first new home offer seems outrageously low, as in too good to be true, and I wonder if the developer is simply buying down the HOA bill to lure buyers in. All right, then check out all the responses. Typically, yes, expect it to increase anywhere from 2 to 10 times or more based on my casual observations. Under the developer, the assessments are always artificially low. When the new HOA board assumes control of the association, they usually have a reserve study performed and recalculate assessments based on what they actually expect to pay to maintain everything. This is not what the developer does, so expect the assessments to go up a lot. As a board member, this is extremely common with mass builders such as Lennar or DR. The initial dues are nowhere close to actual OPEX. The fees are low to get people in the door. Yes, they will advertise $73 a month. Once they have a good amount of ownership, you will see the increase. which they will also file paperwork releasing themselves. Okay, now for a more official source and real life scenario, let's take a look at Risinger Court condominiums in Fort Worth. Their HOA recently sent out a notice reminding their owners, when you purchased your home in the Risinger Court community, you agreed to the established terms of the Homeowners Association. The letter continues, this letter serves as notification that the Board of Directors has voted to increase the assessments, trash service, and bulk rate internet. This increase is due to the fact that the current assessments are not sufficient to meet the community's needs. Sure enough, we look at the income statement and we see that the developer was subsidizing the HOA to the tune of over $65,000 a year. Now, your question is, was there ever a time that the assessments they quoted would have been sufficient? I mean, was it ever even remotely possible that the amount quoted to you as the HOA in the beginning would have covered the actual expenses? When the community opens, the likelihood is that it's going to be a developer-controlled community that at some point will transition into resident governance. Hub Associate explains it this way. It says, typically, the developer will subsidize or deficit fund the association until there are homeowners paying sufficient assessments to cover the expenses. So the builder or the developer is footing the bill, and eventually they're going to withdraw, and the homeowners will have to take over all the expenses. If you're buying in such a situation where the community is still very new, the HOA amount seems a little too good to be true, okay, you want to ask a few questions. First of all, how many units will there eventually be? And then request to see an income statement. You're probably going to find the developers subsidizing, right? And then your question is, when the rest of the homes are built, will it be enough to replace the part that the developer is funding? All right, so let's just say it isn't even close. Is your HOA bill going to double, triple, or even more? I mean, can you handle that increase in your monthly budget? There are so many rate buy downs on the market now that when you choose to sidestep those and you're like, hey, I'm going to go with a fixed rate mortgage, it becomes all too misleading to think, again, a fixed rate mortgage is equal to a fixed house payment, okay? What you don't want, all right? You don't want to make that mistake. Now, if you're new to the whole Texas property tax scene, I want you to keep one phrase in mind. Okay, are you ready? Here it is. Magic phrase here. I declared the value when I bought it. All right, I want you to have that phrase in mind. And then when you're getting your lender pre-approval letter and you're deciding how much of it you are willing to spend on a particular house, go by what the taxes will become based on the purchase price. Counties typically have tax estimators, and all you have to do is enter the price, what we're going to consider to be market value, and it'll give you a very close estimate to what your taxes will be. If the lender wants to use a higher amount, okay, that's fine. Ask them for the details, but don't go with a lower amount. Then pay close attention to how your property tax value changes the first year, because I assure you, especially if you're buying new construction, it will change. As closing is probably going to still be based on land value, meaning it'll often be worth like $50,000 when you close, and then $1 million right by the end of the year. So what you want is for your property tax escrow to be based on what you paid for it, okay? And here's why. Remember that magic phrase I mentioned earlier, right? I declared the value when I bought it. Well, the very definition of value, okay, in its truest sense, is when a ready, willing, and able buyer and a ready, willing, and able seller come together and agree on a price. All right, this is the supreme definition of value. If you ever look at an actual formal appraisal, a lot of times it will say estimate of value. And that's because, again, the definition in its purest sense is what happens in the open market when a buyer and a seller come together. When you receive your first tax bill, check that amount compared to what you paid. If it is higher than what you paid, you need to contact the appraisal district and use that magic phrase, okay? Hey, listen, Mr. Appraiser, I declared the value when I bought it. Now, I can just tell you personally, I have won every time I've argued value using that phrase. In fact, I'm going to give you an example. Back in the foreclosure days, all right, we bought a foreclosed home for $57,000. That was awesome, those prices back then, right? It was assessed for $82,000. and I went up there, to the appraisal district, took my closing statement, and I told them, same thing. Listen, I declared the value when I bought it. Well, the appraiser hemmed and hawed. Okay, he did not want to lower the value by 30%, right? But I just kept saying over and over again, same thing. Listen, I declared the value when I bought it. And ultimately, he lowered the value, right? Now, I realize, okay, that difference, okay, that may not sound like much by today's prices, all right? But if you look at it from a percentage standpoint, okay, it's basically like taking a $400,000 house and lowering it to $280,000. And it really made him sick, okay, the appraiser, to lower the value that much. But again, there's that magic in that phrase. I declared the value when I bought it. The one constant you can count on is there will be a massive change in your home's value and your taxes the first year. So if you figure out your taxes based on the purchase price, and then the appraiser tries to raise the value above that, again, you march down there to the appraisal district, utter the magical phrase, right, and get the value right back to what you paid. So from the very beginning, schedule your property tax budget based on what you paid for the property. And then if they try to raise it above it, all right, you've got your magic phrase, just go fight it. Now, I do want to caution you about tax proration. A lot of times with new construction, if you close, for example, in March, the proration will be completely wrong. And the reason for this is that the value is still usually based on land, all right? We're talking around $50,000. At closing, the title company will have a tax certificate, but the amount will, often be based on it being unimproved land. However, and this is really important for you to know, even though the wrong information is shown at closing, the right amount will be reflected by the time tax bills come due at the end of the year. I want to give you an example of this, okay? Let's just say you're buying a house in Collin County in the city of Prosper. You're in Prosper ISD in the Collin County Water District in Collin College, and the appraisal district has your home listed at the land value of $50,000. The taxes at closing will be $1,593.28 for the entire year. This will be prorated between the builder as the seller and you as the buyer. If you close in March, for example, the builder will pay 3 months worth of that amount, so roughly $400. But now you've been in your house for most of the year, October rolls around, and the tax bill arrives. The appraisal district has reassessed your home correctly as land plus improvement, and now it's valued at $1 million. Your new tax bill is $31,865.63. Now you owe $31,865, of which the seller paid $400. Okay, he should have paid close to $8,000 for owning the home for the first 3 months, but no, he just paid $400. In this situation, when you did everything right, you made sure your escrow was set to what your property taxes would become, you are still going to have an escrow shortage, and it's going to be a big one. So this is what I recommend. Do not invest all of your capital into your home purchase. Know going in that this is going to happen, that there will more than likely be an escrow shortage, okay? And plan for that. Have the money set aside for that. The math is there through the tax estimator, all right? Have that amount set aside. Now, there are some builders who will prorate after closing to pay the amount they should have paid, okay? But what you need to know is that most of them won't. Now, if you're looking in the pre-owned sphere, you're gonna see a huge change as well. This huge change, okay, this is universal across the board. And you wanna know what gets really tricky with pre-owns is when the value is already at what you're paying for it. And so you automatically think, well, this must be accurate. Where you get caught here, okay, your trap is when the seller has different exemptions than you do. So you're buying a house for $500, that's already valued at $500, let's just say, but you miss that the seller has an over 65 exemption. The taxes are probably going to end up way too low. You are going to see a huge change in your home's value and your taxes the first year, okay? Just count on it. But make sure your property tax escrow is set up based on what you pay for the home and what your exemptions are. In fact, I just really, really want to encourage you in general to take ownership of how your escrow account is set up with your lender. Make sure your property taxes are accurate and make sure your insurance is based on a realistic amount for the coverage you want. I mean, this is especially true at the very beginning when you're still trying to decide what to spend. All right, I've seen loan estimates provide an estimate of $100 a month for insurance. And then I've seen some put, $300 a month. And these lenders aren't the ones that are gonna be making that payment, okay? You are. So what's an estimate for them is reality for you. For instance, you probably didn't know this, but Texas home insurance rates have increased 54.5% from 2019 through March of 2024. In fact, according to Lending Tree and Quadrant Information Services, when it comes to home insurance, Dallas and Fort Worth are among the highest in the state. This because, according to Rich Johnson with the Insurance Council of Texas, Texas ranks top 5 in almost every peril that you think of, whether it's hurricanes, hail, wind, flooding, lightning strikes, tornadoes, all of those things. When it comes to setting up your monthly payment, the mortgage company is going to pay a year's worth of insurance up front. As long as you're going to have the same coverage, there's probably not going to be a huge abrupt change like there will be with the property taxes. So really, your big risk here is before you go under contract, back when you're deciding how much you're willing to pay for a home. What you don't want to do is agree to pay $600,000 for a home based on assuming that your insurance is going to be $300 per month, and then it ends up actually being $500 a month. With a pre-owned home, your lender and the home you buy probably will not be affiliated. Okay, so that's important to know. But with new construction, there's a good chance it will. So what I'm talking about here is there's a very good chance that there will be an overall company that owns the construction company, the lender, and the title company. And that represents an inherent conflict of interest, and you need to recognize that. And I'm not saying there's anything untoward or unethical going on, but just recognize it as the conflict of interest that it is. If you save less for insurance or property taxes, you can afford to pay more for a house. All right, so what you want is to be the empowered buyer and advocate for yourself. Make sure your escrow account is set up correctly and generously. Now, I've told you over and over again to know your monthly payment, but I haven't told you where to find it on the loan estimate. So depending on the form the lender gives you, you should be able to find your escrow amount, okay, meaning again, your taxes and your insurance in section G. Remember, with both of these, you are not going to take what the lender says as gospel. You are going to verify them for yourself. All right, now in this example, the loan amount is $621,000 and the insurance is $250 with the taxes $800. Now, when you look at the next example, the loan amount is $517,619, insurance $129.40, taxes $1121.51. Our next example has the loan amount as $840,000, insurance as $150, taxes as $1,500. Now we have another example, this time with a loan amount of $466,835, insurance $166.67, taxes $1,016.64. And another one with a loan amount of $400,000, insurance for $225, taxes for $1,067. I want you to notice a few things about these examples. First off, you can tell some of the lenders aren't even trying to be accurate with the property taxes. So if you see round numbers like 800 or 1,500, these are not the actual amounts, okay? They're just giving you an estimate. Also, do you see how incredibly inconsistent the insurance portion of these estimates is? All right, we had a higher priced home being quoted $150 for insurance, and then a much smaller home being quoted $225. The thing is, it's not that the lender's being dishonest here. They honestly don't know what coverage you will want. And that's why you have to step in and obtain that information. And what we really don't want, okay, and especially if you're new to Texas, is for you to be blindsided by insurance costs here. The idea is to get as accurate of a monthly payment as you can that works within your budget. And remember again, this is not about what your lender says you qualify for, okay? This is about your personal budget. Now, if you're not sure what that amount is, all right, I made a whole video about it that you can watch right here. In the meantime, Wendy out.